All right, go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today to discuss data projects and our museum collections. I'm Sarah Ponictera, Assistant Dean for Special Collections in the Gallery. I'm here today with my colleagues, Jean Versile, Gallery Director, Laura Hatke, I think she hasn't joined quite yet, but she'll be joining us shortly. She's the Collections Manager, and Jacqueline Deppy, the Special Collections Assistant. This is the team who put this presentation together today and put the site together, most importantly. So Seton Hall has an amazingly rich museum collection, as you'll see a little later in the presentation. And we're happy to have this chance to share the collections from a bird's eye view, as opposed to our exhibits, which spotlight particular objects in the collections. So to start by giving you a little context about the kinds of data that museum professionals create in the course of their work. Museum staff create incredibly detailed descriptive data of every object in the collection. What you see here on the bottom is just a tiny fragment of everything that's captured, and already this is a substantial amount. Here you see the title, the artist, what the piece is made out of, the date it was created, and this is both a unique identifier that's given to each object and a record of when it was given to the museum. So it was created in 2007, it was donated here in 2010. But this is, as I said, just a tiny bit. There's an enormous amount of information that's captured about each object in the collections, from its size and shape. That's important for planning exhibits or for planning storage, to its culture of origin, which may or may not be the same as where it was in fact created. You can imagine there might be Japanese pottery that would be created in Norway or something, and that is part of the story of the object and helps us interpret it and understand it. There are also the details of how it has been displayed in the past. You know, this particular piece might have been lent to another museum, and so all the records of how it was transported, what happened to it, how long it was on display, when it came back, that would all be recorded. In addition to the history of the piece itself, so this, as a more recent object, probably has a more straightforward history, but you can imagine a portrait that was created in the 15th century might have had an incredible story behind it, from being passed down within a family to perhaps being sold, being kept in different people's collections, and all of that history is part of the meaning of the object, and so all of that is kept. So as you can imagine, data projects involving museum collections are practically infinite. Some data projects might be particularly useful to museum professionals. I can imagine a data analysis project looking at what types of damage tend to occur to particular formats of pieces. That would help an institution identify any risk factors in its storage or in its handling procedures, or perhaps institutions that we lend to that we notice the pieces come back damaged. Maybe we'll stop lending to them, things like that that are sort of more practical. There's also, of course, intellectual projects. You can imagine, like the piece that I imagined of a Japanese ceramic created in Norway. It might be interesting to look at if there was a trend of creating Asian art in that country at that particular time, and look year over year, like which pieces were created and how long that trend lasted, what might have been influencing it, immigration patterns, and so on. So it can be part of an intellectual project or part of a more practical project. So for this reason, because all this information about our collections is useful to different people in so many different ways, we're moving toward making our collections data available to the public, making a public-facing database. There are so many more objects in our collections than we could ever exhibit. And so this is a way for us to share our collections with the community so that they can see what's there, they can use these pieces in their own projects, or see things that might inspire them. So this is a way to reach those people who might have a difficult time getting to an exhibit, or might see things better in this way through aggregate trends over time, rather than focusing on the one particular piece, or just finding the particular piece that means a lot to them. So this is a way for us to fulfill our mission of sharing our collections and supporting the intellectual life of the university. However, to prepare for this, there's a lot of work to be done. We have to look at the data that's been created over time and do a data cleanup project, which we're in the midst of right now. The reason for this is just that for collections as complex as this and pieces that exist in a variety of different contexts, they've been handled by people from different academic backgrounds and just with different perspectives. Often when these pieces were first added to the database or first collected, they might have been described in a more rudimentary way that perhaps suited the purposes of the moment, but now we realize that it's really partial and really limits the way that it can be used. One case in point that we're working on right now is the field of subject. So this is a field that's used for a piece of representational art like this that you see in this slide. So we're basically looking at how we can make this available to people who are looking for artworks or pieces that connect to a certain theme that they might be interested in. So like boats. Somebody might search our database for like, what pieces does Seton Hall have about boats? So we want to be able to make that search possible by creating the data that will be that will enable that search. But as you can see, it's quite complicated. A piece like this it's pretty subjective to determine what exactly it does represent. You can imagine somebody looking at this piece and saying, oh, it's about, the most sort of highlighted part here is the sort of griffin. There's this sunrise or possibly a sunset. There's a cityscape, a river, a reflection. There's all these colors, perhaps tiles. And then this outline of this boat, which perhaps because we know it's about Venice, perhaps it's a gondola. It creates its own set of questions of like, what is a boat? What is a gondola? Yeah, I mean, we know what it is, but like, what's the best way to describe it to make it available to researchers who might be interested in it? This is subjective. And so over time, people have come to different conclusions about what's most important and how to describe it. And so that's what we're looking at now. We're looking at all of the descriptive terms that people have created over the years and trying to make sure that they are as useful as possible, as clear as possible, and as comprehensive as possible so that people can find what they're looking for. This is just one part of the problem because, as I mentioned before, there are also people in different fields that have tried to describe the objects that are in Seton Hall's collections. The main fields that are represented in our database are art history and archaeology. And you can imagine that these two fields have quite different ways of looking at objects and quite different ways of describing them. If you look into a museum database, it's amazing how many fields there are that represent all of the different types of information that you might want to capture about these different pieces. For a portrait, of course, you'd want to represent the artist, the subject, the size, the type, perhaps the colors. And for perhaps a piece of pottery or an arrowhead that was part of an archaeological dig, it's an entirely different set of fields and information. And so this is why in a museum database, a single object could have over 100 fields associated with it. And because some of these objects have such a long and complex history, and museum professionals' mission is to make these objects available for any type of scholarly use, not to limit it by restricting the information about it only to one field's lens of perception, but enabling all kinds of different people to see the potential in these objects. So we've embarked on this project. We're about halfway through, and we're systematizing and clarifying the data in preparation to make it public. We're looking at key fields. We're eliminating duplicate terms. We're updating terms because names have changed over time. Names of people and names of places have changed substantially. And so we're updating those so that they can be as clear and correct as possible. And also looking at, if you've ever worked in a database, you'll recognize this problem when perhaps the descriptive term is correct, but it's in the wrong field. So it's quite a long road, and it's been wonderful to dive into this with the team that we have. I'm going to turn this over now to see what's possible once we've finished all this cleanup work and we're ready to present things to the public, to the story map that we've created. And Gallery Director Jean Brasile will tell you about it. And before I turn it over to her, I just want to thank the whole team for their work, from our collections manager who exported all the data and all the images, to our special collections assistant, Jackie, who put in all this data in record time into this this amazing story map tool. So I'm excited to see, for you guys to see what is all, what we've been able to share. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Jean.
Great. So thanks for coming, and let me see. I'm just waiting. Good, I have control. Great. So thanks for coming, and I think I know most of you, but just for the record, I'm Jean Brasile, Gallery Director, and I'm really excited to show you about some of our collections here, and what we can do with them in terms of parsing some data and relating that to the collections. Before I start, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about the different types of collections we have, just in case you don't know. Many of you are familiar with some of them, perhaps. I'm trying to share my screen. I shared the wrong one, of course. Hold on a second. Let me do that one more time and do it the right way this time. There we go. Perfect. So we have a number of different collections that are global in scope. One of them is the Wang Fangyu collection of Asian art, which consists of a variety of materials from a lot of different Asian cultures, including India, China, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, parts of Pakistan. We also have collections of 20th century photographs from European and American photographic masters. We have a lot of liturgical objects from both the ADN and our own collections here, representing our Catholic identity. They can include things like vestments and chalices and papal decrees or bulls. We have Bishop Bailey's diaries and a lot of other related artifacts. And then we have Herb Craft's collection of museum objects that are ethnographic in scope. Some were produced by collectors and others were the result of archaeological digs. And then we have all sorts of other collections that you'll see a little bit more just in a moment. So art and artifacts really can be used in data visualization projects effectively. And I'm going to show you two tools. One is Google Arts and Culture. I'll show you that in brief because I think most of you have seen that already. I'll just talk about in brief some of its search capabilities or sorting capabilities. And then I'd really like to go into a new tool called Story Maps, which uses geotagging and images to relay information in a different type of way. So our works that we're taking care of here range all the way from prehistoric, like the Neolithic period, all the way through present. So we've got about literally 10,000 years worth of a range of objects here. And this presentation is only a very small sampling. It would have just been exhaustive to include the tens of thousands of objects that we steward here. So you can keep that in mind. And at the end of the presentation, I'll show you how to get in touch with me or the staff here if you'd like to do some research or know more about the collections. And these collections really are for the use of scholars, including faculty, students, and outside researchers. The point of having collections is to share them and to build on the knowledge we have about them as they're used over and over again and create new meaning or augment existing meaning. So let's talk about the purposes of collections a little bit. So, they're not just stores of objects. They're really meant to represent our history here at Seton Hall, our values, our culture. And these objects, these collections are really formed by generations of scholars, people like Wang Fangyu, who taught Chinese language here, and people like Herbert Kraft, who was an archaeologist, or alumni like Ron DiArgenio, who donated his Greco-Roman collection of coins, and professors who donate some of their collections. And these collections are really one of a kind. It's not, the individual objects are certainly priceless, but it's the proximity of these collections in context with one another that really provide even more meaning. And once these collections are disassembled, they really can't ever be recreated. You know, these are coming here to us over time and through a particular lens. And once these collections are broken up, they can't really be reconstituted. So we really play an important role here at the university in preserving not just the individual objects, but the history of the university over time, and the scholarship and the evolution of knowledge related to these collections and objects. And a lot of these materials are very unique and can't really be represented elsewhere, because some of them are the products of occasions that have happened at Seton Hall, or research that was done here at Seton Hall. And so we're really preserving larger, our role is preserving larger things like scholarship, not just objects. They kind of go hand in hand. So at Seton Hall, the collections, like I mentioned, also, they have this direct relationship, but they also reflect our mission and culture, and the diversity of our students, faculty, and staff, as well as the larger community that we reside in, whether you're thinking about South Orange or Newark, Essex County, or New Jersey. I kind of think of our collections having like a radiating, almost like a Doppler effect. They radiate out in a circle towards larger communities. And this piece here, and you know, as you go, I'm going to flip back. As we go through this presentation, you'll start to get a idea of the scope of the collections, like this Chinese carved opal, or this stirrup pot from Peru. But really, so I explained a little bit about why universities have collections, but let's go a little bit more into depth on that. So ICOM, who is the International Council of Museums, it's a professional organization. They're like the international equivalent of the American Alliance of Museums, which is an American organization. But they govern policies and procedures and best practices in our industry. So in their opinion, the function of university collections and the people that maintain these collections, they really form important interdisciplinary links for the community, whether that's our local Seton Hall community or, you know, the larger at large community. Objects have the capacity to enhance teaching and research in a way that maybe statistics or words don't, and I'll talk about that in depth in a little bit. And they also promote a positive image of the institution, Seton Hall, because if we lend the objects to other institutions, or we place them in proximity with loans from other institutions, or artwork on loan from artists, all of these things form a liaison or an outreach or relationship with other communities. And that provides that welcoming access point. One of the things about the gallery is that we really are open to the public. We're not just receiving people from here on campus. And so that points to our larger role in being a welcome point for everyone. We've had people here, not just from New Jersey, but you know, all over the country. And I've had visitors here from Norway, Japan. It's really amazing the power of art and what it can do to generate visitation here, even a small museum like this. So the museum here at the university, and all universities, are really ideally placed and positioned to connect disparate pieces of knowledge into a cogent idea or a cogent narrative. And it's the way they are brought into context with one another, and the way a curator might put a narrative together, or a scholar might put a narrative together to bring all these disparate pieces together. And really, collections can stimulate learning and intellectual development. And all of this information that I just quoted, you can see, is from this white paper that ICOM published down there in the URL. This Vietnamese bow is also a donation from one of our professors, Ken Hoffman, a retired professor. So reading information contained within an object, or visual literacy, as you might call it, can really be a significant source of new knowledge, because everybody understands information differently and might describe it differently. And although the facts of the object might change, the subjective information associated with it can be seen through different lenses, like Sarah mentioned earlier. And this note here that university collections are an appreciating research asset, what I really mean by that is every time someone exhibits an object and interprets it, or does a paper, or speaks about it, it adds to that knowledge base that we have about an object. And part of the information we store with objects and in our database is really this adjacent knowledge. We do have a capacity for storing additional materials beyond just that record and the metadata fields. So meaning really isn't static, as Sarah mentioned. Again, it changes over time, and sometimes many things can be true of an object all at one time, and they're both equally true. So objects also can provide additional entry points for learning. And if you consider that people have different ways of learning and understanding information, and this was explored in Harvard professor Howard Gardner's book, Multiple Intelligences, which was published in 1993. And he also wrote a book, Frame of Mind, which I referenced here. That was published in 1983. That was the preliminary research he did about multiple intelligences. And these are the 8 different types of intelligences associated with learning. And I'll let you look into that. But some people are, more attuned to reading and learning that way. Some people are into bodily learning by doing. That's why you'll often see interactive kiosks at a museum or in an exhibit, because people learn by doing, by manipulating something on a screen or moving an object through space in tandem with things on exhibit. Some people learn by music, or some people learn by mathematics. And if you're one of those people, great. Data visualization is easily understood. But if you're not, objects can help be that access point to help you understand numbers or data if you're not mathematically oriented. So let's talk about what objects can add to data sets. So objects can personalize narratives through storytelling more than just the numbers can tell us. And they impart a humanities context, which is really an emotional relationship with an object, which also extends towards an emotional relationship with the data. So it no longer is just facts and numbers. Now people can maybe relate, like these numbers relate to a person, these numbers relate to a culture, these numbers can relate to a phenomenon. And that is going to maybe help people understand the data a little bit more, because only 5% of people are shown to remember numbers and statistics, but 63% of people can remember the story associated with an object or statistics. And that's where objects can really help people understand through these different capacities for learning. So Eileen Cooper Greenhill, who is a really important museum educator, for instance, she talked about bodily learning and experiential encounters, and that's where maybe story maps or Google Arts and Culture, what I'm about to speak about, that's where they can come in, because bodily learning can also mean just clicking through on a mouse or pressing a button on a keyboard. That's bodily as well. And that orients you spatially. So you can orient yourself in the context of an exhibit in a gallery, having that physical relationship as you move through like real space in real time in a gallery. But if you use a database or you use an online tool, that's a different kind of like geospatial relationship with data, but it's no less profound and no less palpable if you're that type of learner. So what this really does is not just humanizes the data, but it orients you in a very different spatial relationship with data and objects. So if you're a bodily learner, it's called kinesthetic or proprioception, that type of learning. These personal encounters enhance learning, add that emotional component I spoke about just moments ago, and show the humanity behind the numbers. And these palpable impacts for differently oriented people can help resonate more widely with the people receiving this data or with the people building these data sets. So it works for both the creator and the user in a more palpable way. And how? So you can uncover trends and patterns and insights that might get lost if you're looking only at the numbers. And I'll show you some types of data sets that might demonstrate that in a little bit. You can identify hidden stories, because suppose you're looking at data related to Sicily, and this donkey headdress is associated with the data. Maybe all of a sudden it will make you think about a story about something about Sicily, or something about donkeys, or maybe the colors or the patterns might help you see relationships to the data. So that's how objects can play an important part to understanding data. They can also illuminate known stories, or sometimes data and objects can inform or corroborate research. So they can be the jumping off point for a research project, not just a way to demonstrate research or data. And they can also offer alternative interpretation or access points for learning. By nature, the human mind loves to organize data and organize information, and that's what objects and data can do together. They play into our tendency to want to organize and see patterns. That's just a neurological fact about us. And so using data and graphics and objects play into this tendency and augment learning in that way. So enough about what objects can do. Let's look at some of these tools. So the first one is Google Arts and Culture, and I'm just going to show you a screenshot, so I'm not going back and forth. It's a little bit clunky to go back and forth between Chrome and my PowerPoint. So our Google Arts and Culture page currently has 163 objects on it. You can see here, and we're adding to that constantly. What's interesting though, and it's on a slider format. So if you go right, there's the other 100 some odd objects. This tool here, if you click on this icon, it will organize things by popularity. So everything to the left is more popular. These are the things that people are clicking on more frequently, and the things on the right are things that are less popular. The other way that Google can sort data is by time. So this is roughly objects based around the year 1100 Common Era. And so we have things from the 16th century and things from, these are pretty much all 16th century objects, it looks like. But here's the median year for most of these objects. And you can see, again, we've got things from all over the world. Here's a Chinese vase. This is a pot from Peru. This is a Greco-Roman arrowhead. This is I think a Greek oil lamp. This is a Madonna statue that's from the like Bruges, and this is a piece. And this is a piece of dolphin coin money from Greece. So again, you're getting, and this is another coin from India. So you're getting a little bit more of a scope of what our collections are. But again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And then here, if you want to get a little bit have a little more fun, it also sorts objects by color. Here we're looking at things that are orange and red and a little bit towards the yellow scale. So these are some of the ways that you can sort data in Google. And these are the tools that Google provides. We have no control over this, but it's kind of fun to play with. But I want to talk now about this tool, Story Maps, and what Story Maps does. And what it really, the capacity that's fun, is that it connects, and this is the tag, this is the tagline from Story Maps. I'm just borrowing from them. So it connects people, locations, and data with interactive maps. And this is how it works. So let me, sorry, I can't get out of this tool. So let me now move to let me move to that tool and show you what that looks like. Just bear with me. I got to find the window because somehow it got buried here. Sorry. I thought I closed all these windows. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Let me find out where that went. Here we go. Sorry. The window's open and I just cannot locate it. Hold on 1 second, folks. I did a dry run before this. There we go. There's my window. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, so let me start at the beginning. So this is story maps, and it shows collections from around the world. And you'll see this is an automatic scroll. I can pause it here. I'm just going to let it scroll through. This is our, well, actually, I'm going to stop it for a moment. This is our current exhibit. It's a screenshot. So if you'd like to visit that, it's open. And here's our mission. And really, we show diverse collections from around the world, and we enhance the intellectual life of Seton Hall through interdisciplinary exhibitions. And I'm just kind of, trimming that down, getting to the main points. So here we come to story maps, and I'll let it scroll down a little bit more, and then I'll show you some of the capacities it has. So if I would like to look at things on a global scale, which is part of what we do here, global education, and I'm going to play around with this map. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the countries associated with, again, this very small sampling of objects. We only have, I think, 99 objects here, but we literally have tens of thousands. So as I scroll through the left from country to country, the map will move towards those regions, and you can see we have things from all sorts of places: Belgium, Bohemia, Brazil, Bulgaria, Central Asia, China, Costa Rica. So it follows around the map. I'm going to actually scroll down and show you some of the, we loaded a few extra images into like Sweden or Switzerland and the United States. So here's an example. So for Switzerland, there's this little arrow here. We actually have two objects from Switzerland. One is this contemporary print by Risa Boro Kimura, a Japanese artist who did a series of 19 cities around the world. Many of them are loaded onto this presentation. But if you use this little arrow, you can also see a print from roughly 1794. And this is by Angelica Kaufman. We have a large collection of historic prints as well. So, and let me just show you the United States. We have a number, I think 5 objects from the United States. It's not going to break it down into the state. We haven't discovered that capacity yet. It might exist. But it just kind of picks like one geo point for the country. But it allows you to scroll through multiple objects like this Pueblo necklace, or this stained glass from the Immaculate Conception Chapel from Meyer of Munich. And the creator is from Germany, but this was created in America. So that's kind of some of the weirdness of the data. Like Sarah had mentioned, sometimes created in one place, used in another, or similar situations. This petroglyph, which is on view on the 2nd floor of the library from the Lenni Lenape culture. This is from the period of European contact in the Americas shortly thereafter, more commonly known as the Penn Treaty. This belt from the Treaty of Shakamakson is basically a land transfer between the Native Americans and William Penn. And then we also have this Tlingit basket from the Northwestern United States. So that demonstrates a really good variety of objects. If you wanted to scroll by country, you could do that too, just by clicking on any one of these points. and then it will bring you right to the related object and an image. And if you'd like to see a blow up of the image, you can just click on it and it will show you the whole object. Right now, you're just getting sort of like a little thumbnail. And, you know, this really shows you the breadth of our collections, vestments, prints, on all sorts of historical subjects, contemporary art, you know, classical ceramics. So we really do have a multicultural treasure trove of objects that are available for your use. And again, this way of mapping is a really great way to connect and make new relationships with data and objects, because maybe you can start seeing trends. If you pick certain objects and use them in your story map, maybe you'll start seeing trends in relationship to images as they appear on the left, or trends where certain objects are kind of lumped together on a map. Or maybe there are other trends that I haven't even uncovered yet, because my data is showing me something different. Every data set will show you different things. So hold on, let me just grab my thoughts here. Yeah, so that really kind of covers some of the, you know, the many capabilities, and I'm sure there are many to be explored. This is our pilot project with this data. And then I just want to talk about maybe data's capabilities by showing you, and I'm loath to share my screen again, but let's see if I can do it without too much difficulty this time. I'd like to share with you a artist that I've worked with and I showed with at the Newark Museum not that long ago. His name is Martin Calvino, and he's a that's the wrong window. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try and locate it again. On his website, so Martin Calvino is a neuroscientist, and he plays with data by using data sets to create art objects. So first, as a neuroscientist, he's very good at parsing data. So he writes his own code. Sorry, I'm still looking for his website. Here we go. So is Martin's website showing?
Yes.
Yeah. Terrific, thank you. So Martin writes his own code as a neuroscientist, and he loves data. So he plays around with data that's not just about neuroscience. This data, he's very much like a social activist. And this data is about applications for mortgages from Latino people and non-Latino people in America. So first he writes his own code, and he's using, look at that amount of data, like 295,000 pieces of data. And I can't recall where he said he got this from. And then he parses it out and creates like bar graphs and matrix plots. And, you know, visually they're really interesting. But what he's also talking about is, you know, how many Latinos were given mortgages versus how many applied, how many were denied versus non-Latino people that received mortgages, and just talking about institutionalized racism. Martin is from Ecuador, so this is a subject close to his heart. And so you can see he's talking about like data related to the banks giving mortgages, the ethnicity of the applicants, the race of the applicants, the sex, the county they're in, whether or not the application was denied, and whether this is like maybe a first mortgage or like a home equity line of credit, the amount of the mortgage and the value, like the loan to value, and then the applicant's income. And so if I scroll down, you can see he also plots data in ways that show it in like a plot point. So ultimately, what he does is create, I'm going to go, give me 1 second. So he winds up creating final projects that look like this. Weavings that take data and make them into objects like this. And you can see there's a relationship between like graphs and plot points and graph lines. but all of that data winds up as a weaving that has a relationship to that data. So I love data visualization and art objects because there are people thinking like this and working on really exciting projects related to art objects and data. And, you know, I love artists because they see things that we don't see. They have a different way of thinking. And this is what I mean about alternative ways of seeing. So this is like some of the best examples that I can think of people using data in new and innovative ways to reach new people. So this data became an art project on view at the Newark Museum, where it was appreciated as an art object. But by speaking to the artist and by looking at the catalog, then that provides the access point to the data. So sometimes people use the data to get to the art, and sometimes people use the art to get to the data. It functions both ways. So with that in mind, I just wanted to, I want to go back to my PowerPoint. And I did it wrong again. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm so much better at Zoom. There we go. So in closing, I just wanted to say, you know, if there is any way that you would like to use data or objects or collections, or you would like to use objects as research, by all means, you know, we're not only open to that, that's absolutely what we're here for. And we would be delighted to do that with you. And you can reach out by getting in touch. And I'm going to put my information in the chat if you want to do that. And so, you know, the possibilities really are endless. And, you know, this is just the starting point for conversation. This is not the only possibility for using data and objects. This is just kind of like to stimulate some thought and talk about some capacities. And, you know, I just hope that some of you will maybe be interested in this and avail yourself of some of these tools. I'd love to work with you. So thanks. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Laura. And thank you all of you for listening. You know, it's always really exciting to hear about what you're working on and how we can help you. I'm reading Mary's comments. No, I don't know about the Xenotext project, Mary. Is there like a URL I can look at?
Oh, that's
or what is it?
Let me see. I'm just looking at, that's a good question. I'm digging around. Yeah, it's by, I'm not going to get his name right, Christian Book. And so a Canadian experimentalist, he's a poet, and he's basically injecting, he's doing this genetic engineering and trying to have these sort of injecting poetic genomic sequences into E. coli bacterium, and that they are writing the poem.
Oh, wow. So it's like a generative, it's like a generative
yeah, so it's
poem.
very, I know. It's, I mean, yeah, I guess it is
biological
data.
specimens. I love that.
Yeah, it's very, I didn't know about it. I'm editing a book right now, co-editing a book with a bunch of people, and this is one of the essays. It's on this and some other things. So I thought this was really cool, but I'll try to find a link. So,
I'm so
anyway, started to pop in.
No, that's great. This is exactly the kind of synergies I'm talking about, because you know, who would have thought that you could make poetry out of like biological specimens and DNA? Like,
absolutely,
artists are brilliant.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Nice.
Yeah. So let me see. Yeah, I'm still looking. All right.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions or other really cool things that I don't know about that I'd love to like look up, but feel free to jump in if you have any questions or type it in the chat.
Okay, let's see. This has.
We've been reading about museums like some other university museums that have been able to like once all this data is put together, like be able to create these data visualizations that would show like that even like visitors can manipulate to explore different aspects of the collection, to be able to see it in this way, like as a whole collection rather than just seeing one snippet.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting.
Right. So this is a link to the Poetry Foundation, and it shows some of the poems that got generated and a little intro by him. So
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for inviting us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that link, Mary. I can't wait to read this.
That's great. Jean, the textile art was amazing.
Yeah, Martin Calvino is a great artist. I'm actually working with him on a project in Morristown soon. So I'll be able to enjoy his 5 or 6, actually 6 pieces in the show soon. He's even got an installation with like people wearing those weavings. So it really makes the data, it provides an even more poignant human context.
Yeah, that's amazing. Mary, would a presentation like this be good at the DH Friday sessions? Seems like that.
Second. Is there a DH Friday session?
Or the Rachel Warmington.
Oh, her group. Oh,
her group.
Yeah, no, I think that would be really interesting. Yeah, I would say absolutely to reach out to Rachel and see. Yeah, I think it would be really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about doing the DH Summer Symposium again.
Okay.
You know, so we've done it in past years. We haven't done it in a while. So yeah, but I think people would be really interested in this too, Jean. I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah. Maybe one day we can even have like Martin speak here. Like I think he'd be really into that. Yeah. He works at Rutgers, so he's kind of close. I think he lives in like somewhere down off of 22, that neighborhood.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be great. I should shout out to Martha, since she's here also, who's actually been executing some of this data cleanup that I talked about.
Yes, thank you, Martha. We'd be dead in the water without you.
Thanks. Glad to help out.
No, thank you. You did a lot of heavy lifting.
Right.
All right. So